Good morning, dear members and friends of the First Parish Church of Somersworth. I'm sorry last week we didn't do a fireside chat. And this week we are definitely doing a fireside chat. It's been, as I think I've mentioned, it's been, for me, it's one of the hallmarks of kind of being with you. My opportunity to do what I always love doing is to make pastoral calls, and literally they are pastoral calls because I'm limited to phone conversations with you. This fireside chat, I'm happy to say too, I think on one other occasion, last Saturday, they installed this new Harman pellet stove, which is giving me great joy and comfort and warmth. Annette and I sit here every evening, we're either reading or watching the news, and it's just a very comfortable. I don't miss the old one. It's in the barn. It's for sale. If anyone wants to buy a good Piazzetta pellet stove, I have one for sale. But you can't have my new Harman. So here I am. I'm going to jump around with my fireside chats, and I think I'm going to start with well, I'm going to jump around. I'm not going to go into any kind of chronology. I had a wonderful conversation with Sue Volkhammer. I was really touched last week watching this service, and just and amused to think that there she is reading the psalm, and her granddaughter, Kaylee, is sitting next to her, and AJ the cat. And I'm thinking, now, we couldn't do this if we were meeting in the church. These are some of the warm and wonderful things that can happen as we're just being filmed in my home. I can't bring this pellet stove to First Parish. I know I can't. So how I'm ever going to do the fireside chats, we'll find another way. But I was just warmed and touched by Sue sitting there with her granddaughter and AJ the cat. So I grew up with cats. I love cats. I don't have one now, and I would sometimes wish I did. But I was very touched by that and enjoyed seeing Angela and Cassidy, all of them together reading the Lord's Prayer. 3 generations. It was very moving, very touching, and I thought really rich part of the service for First Parish. One of the fireside chats that I had really was a written letter to Linda Gauthier. I met Linda when I brought the paperwork I needed to do for Social Security or for to prove my citizenship and things that now are required as an accountant, as a treasurer of the church. She's responsible for that paperwork. I brought it over. We had a wonderful conversation on the phone before I went, and when I went, among other things, we're both Bergers. I'm a member of the New Hampshire Audubon Society. She was previously, and of course, in conversation with her, her office basically overlooks a bird sanctuary. She has a feeder on a window in her office, and when I went to the backyard, and you could see absolutely. I mean, it's a bird sanctuary. And I can just imagine what it's going to be like in the spring when the migratory birds come back. But even now, it's lively and been beautiful. I wrote to Linda a couple of weeks ago. I said, Linda, I saw an eastern bluebird at my feeder. Now, an eastern bluebird, they're a migratory bird. And I've never seen an eastern bluebird in December or January. She wrote back, she said, Thomas, I have 4 of them at my feeders, 4. I said, what? I wrote to the New Hampshire Audubon Society with the same query. I said, I've got an eastern bluebird at my feeder. And the woman who answered me from Concord said the same thing. She has 4 eastern bluebirds at her feeder. And she said to me in the same email, in the same conversation, you need to buy some mealworms. Now I knew what they were. I have a really wonderful birdsong mix in my feeders. But I never had mealworms. So at her behest and the New Hampshire Audubon, I got on my favorite shopping, Amazon.com, and in a couple of days I had a 5-pound bag of dried mealworms. I asked, and I sent off for a feeder too. The feeder came damaged, so I couldn't. I'm waiting now for a new one, and I asked Linda what she used for the mealworms, and she said she just mixes them in with all the other seed. So I've got 2 big feeders with the mixed seed. I did the same thing, emptied them out, mixed the mealworm in with the mixed seed, and I'll tell you, this is what I wrote to Linda this week. Dear Linda, I added those mealworms to my feeder as you do. Just mixed them in with the mixed seeds. I had 2 drained feeders in record time. The mealworms are pricey, but nothing too good for my feathered friends. I know you share the same passion. Stop. We'll cut the clock. Let's start the letter over again. I shared a few more things with Linda in the letter that I wrote to her, but in the end, wishing her obviously blessings for 2021, and sent her a link to the Audubon Society, and wanted her to become part of the Feathered Friends of the New Hampshire Audubon Society. Well, thank you, Linda. It's wonderful to be knowing a fellow birder. Now, the last fireside chat was actually early this morning. I tried calling Laurel Curtis last night, and and with the directory that I have, it's interesting that Laurel is just a Laurel Curtis. There's no spouse's name or anything. So and there is with most of the other headings or listings. So when I left a message, a voice message the day before, earlier, and when I called, there was a man that answered, and I thought, well, I said, this is Thomas from the church calling, and I'm looking for Laurel. And he said, yes. He said, my wife is out with the grandchildren. I said, well, I said, may I ask your name? And he said, Doug. So we proceeded to have a wonderful chat. And I said to him, based on this, I said, I didn't know anything about a Doug. So I said, now, please tell me about a Doug in Laurel's life. And I said, now, are your intentions honorable? He said, oh, very honorable. We've been married for 35 years. And he went on to just affirm what a wonderful partner he has, how much he loves her, and how lucky he is, to have Laurel as his spouse. And it's so interesting, when I talked to Laurel this morning, I said, I was surprised when I heard the burly voice of a man, former iron worker. Oh, this is Doug. And I said, I didn't know you had a Doug in your life. She said, oh yes, I feel so special to have him. He's a very special person. And I said, well, Laurel, that's the same thing he said about you last night. And I said, I have a saying, and it's this: there's only one society on earth that doesn't hurt anybody. It's called the Mutual Admiration Society. You can't say that about the church. You can't say it about any other organization except the Mutual Admiration Society. And apparently, Laurel, you and Doug are card-carrying members of that Mutual Admiration Society. Blessings to you both. Amen.
Psalm 139, verses 1 through 6 and 13 through 18. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to obtain. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book, before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts. God, how vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. Here ends the reading.
This is the day the Lord has made. Be glad and rejoice in it. Good morning again. I have to say, and I've said to Amy when she came earlier, I feel really very remiss in not mentioning the tragedy I think that we experienced as a nation last week. Annette and I sat for most of the day watching in real time I want to call it the sacking of the capital. It's like the sacking of Jerusalem, or Rome, the attempt to sack our capital. I mean, I sat here teary-eyed, incredulous, and to think of how close we came as a country, with the insurrectionists actually almost achieving the goal of taking some of our legislators captive, and either executing them, hanging them. I mean, we already know there were several deaths. So I would like to just pause for a moment and invite us to send our prayerful concern as a worshiping community to our new president and to the leaders and to the people who were put in harm's way, on behalf of those who lead this country. So please just be in thoughtful reflection and prayer with me for a few moments. We as a church community know about healing and are experiencing that challenge. And we can only hope that this new president, new vice president, new leadership will bring us to a place of continued healing, because our country desperately needs healing. Now, on a more joyful note, I want to tell you that on behalf of the First Parish Church, we have a little gift, and it's this gift. It's this. And it reads, January 15, 2021, to Nia Sierra Olivia Gowell Kent. It's an honor to give you your first Bible. This book contains the Hebrew scriptures called the Old Testament and the Christian portion known as the New Testament. It is a rich and complex book. Fondly, Reverend Dr. Thomas Francis Orahan. I give this to Nia on behalf of First Parish Church. Nia read for our Christmas service, read the Matthew account of the birth account. Now, Nia, like a lot of children her age, because are unchurched, and they basically don't know a lot of the things that we were studying, and with those of us who went to parochial schools, or those of us who were raised in churches where we attended Sunday school. And Nia has expressed an interest in things of the Bible sense. So this goes to Nia.
Thank you. That's really sweet.
And may this be the first of many Bibles that First Parish will give. Usually it's given to confirmands, bar mitzvah time, coming of age, and hopefully we'll have some of that young blood in First Parish, and we'll have something akin to a confirmation class, and we'll be presenting them with their first Bible. I know that Kathy, for example, has the one that she received at confirmation. And when I was at UNH, I actually had a roommate in Durham who grew up for a time in Dover and attended the First Parish Church in Dover, a beautiful church in the Lower Square, not Square, the Tuttle Square. And it was my first time seeing a Bible. I never owned a Bible. So I read from his Bible all the time, the one that he received in confirmation from the First Parish Church. So this week's sermon is on, I'm going to pop right out of the lectionary again. Jonah was supposed to be next week. Well, I'm bringing Jonah to the stage into my sermon this week. Jonah. Now, I haven't really said much about the Old Testament, and this is a very interesting story. Jonah is one of the 12 minor prophets. They're called minor because they're very short books. They're in what we used to call in seminary, in the clean part of the Bible. You know, those little books that were written, after the great works of Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, come all these little books, Habakkuk, Obadiah, Nahum. When was the last time you heard anything? Well, Micah figures into things because of some of his prophecy is in Matthew, having to do with the birth of Jesus, as does Isaiah. But some of these other, Obadiah. Well, Obadiah, he was worried about that little place called Moab, just south of Judah. So they all had their prophetic concerns. But anyway, Jonah is in that collection called the Minor Prophets. And the interesting thing then about Jonah being one of those minor prophets is because it's a very short book, but it's unlike any of the other. The other works it's the story by the prophet. Obadiah writes, Habakkuk writes, Micah writes, Zechariah, Zephaniah. They tell their own story. In this book, there is another narrator who introduces the character of Jonah to us. And in fact, Jonah says 8 words in this book. They're attributed to Jonah. In only 40 days, Nineveh shall be overthrown or destroyed. Only 8 words are attributed to Jonah in this book. The other words are the narrator giving this account. Now, it's quite an account. Some of us who don't know much about the minor prophets do know about Jonah and the whale. Well, let me first clear up the matter of it's not a whale. The Hebrew translates into a large fish. Some alternately have translated a leviathan. Jonah is swallowed up by a large fish. Now, we know the story. God gives an order to Jonah. Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh, and I want you to preach to them. And I want you to tell them they need to reform. They need to change their way of living and treating each other. And Jonah takes a ship that's headed to Spain, gets on the Mediterranean, and he's headed west. Now, we're told that a violent storm came up. And they're all wondering, well, why are we being visited by this basically gale force or hurricane conditions? And what you need to know and remember is that in the Old Testament world, all these forces of nature are attributed to God. I mean, these aren't, as we understand now, the highs and the low pressures and and what happens in our atmosphere or in our solar system. No, these violent occasions these were all works from God. So they're trying to figure out, this is a bad thing, and who's responsible? Who's visiting this trouble upon us? So they're casting lots, and well, come to find out it's Jonah. Jonah's fleeing from the command of God. So this guy is the one that's got us into trouble. Over he goes, overboard, swallowed up by a big fish. And he's in that fish for 3 days. Now remember 3 days? Remember how important 3 days is? 3 days is the period when I was reading last week, the marriage of Cana. That story begins, that gospel begins, really quite simply, as I read last week. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, on the 3rd day. We know that the writers have Jesus in the tomb for 3 days. Now, Jonah is in a sort of tomb as well for 3 days. 3 days is a reference point to a period of darkness and one that produces transformation. That's the meaning of 3 days. 3 days, something perilous happens, but on the 3rd day, something transformative happens. So Jonah is transformative. He's spit up. This big fish spits up Jonah. Now, of course, we know that we must read this story as a parable, as a metaphor. Now, we can't go around thinking that, and I know that there are some persuasions in the Christian church who, everything must be taken literally. Everything must be taken factually. Well, I don't think water is changed into wine, and I don't think people live in the belly of a leviathan for 3 days, swimming around and then are spit up and really go on quite as though nothing of it's ever happened. So we must look for the meaning of the story. And we go on to read that Jonah is really convinced that God is not going to visit Nineveh in this destructive way. Well, when he's spit up, he's revisited by God, and God said, "No, Jonah, you need to go about the business that I sent you on. You need to go back. You need to go to Nineveh." So Jonah does finally travel to Nineveh, and it's there that we read, and all he says is, "If you don't get it together, 40 days, it's over. Your city will be destroyed." And then, of course, what we read is in Jonah. Let me find Jonah. I find him there. I'll find him in Nea's Bible. When the king of Nineveh hears about all of the warning, Nineveh goes about a reformation. Things are changed. The city council does meet and decide that, well, we are going to take care of the poor and maybe look better care of the widows. So instead of a reign of destruction upon Nineveh, Nineveh is visited by a gracious God. And it's remarkable to read, Jonah was very upset about that. He was upset that he didn't sat there and witnessed a city, under siege or destruction. Now, why would Jonah be unhappy about that? Jonah was very unhappy about this and became angry. So he prayed, "Lord, didn't I say before I left home that this is just what you would do? That's why I did my best to run away to Spain. I knew that you are a loving and merciful God, always patient, always kind, and always ready to change your mind and not punish. Now then, Lord, let me die. I'm better off dead than alive." Noah is so distressed, he's in a serious state of decline. He just wants to die. It's a really unusual account. But Jonah, in this book, affirms a merciful God, a loving God. I get concerned sometimes when I hear people say about the Old Testament, and there are some generalizations that are okay to make. That the God of the Old Testament, the God of this Old Testament is this wrathful, vengeful, and there are many occasions when we hear and read a wrathful, raging God. But this does not, you can't leave it there. I'm going to read something that's I find really quite relevant at this point to read to you about the Bible and what we just gave to Nia. The Bible is the product of two historical communities. It's about ancient Israel and the early Christian movement. As such, it is a human product, not a divine product. This claim in no way denies the reality of God. Rather, it sees the Bible as a response to these two ancient communities to God. As their response to God, the Bible tells us how they saw things. Above all, it tells how they saw their life with God. It contains their stories about God's involvement in their lives, their laws, their ethical teachings, their prayers, and their praises, their wisdom about how to live, and their hopes and dreams. It is not God's witness to God, not a divine product, but their witness to God. The Bible is our witness to God. And that witnessing community in the variety of the writings of the Old Testament are sometimes they see a wrath, they see a angry and vengeful God, and other times in Jonah they see a merciful and a loving God. So there is this dichotomy, and Israel itself, and Jonah really is a symbol for Israel, and Israel's commission from its inception was to eventually to be a light to the world, to teach and to educate the Gentile community, the pagan community as they saw it. Much like in the early Christian church, the Christian church was a Jewish church. It was founded by a Jew and continued. They weren't called Christians until the 2nd century. And of course, we read long before that, Paul, in preaching and teaching, says the good news goes to both Jew and Gentile. Jew and Gentile. And historically, the Jews were given the mandate to be a light in the world. Let's go back to Isaiah. Isaiah is saying, "Thus says the Lord your God, who created the heavens and stretched them out, who spread out the earth and what comes from it, who gives breath to the people upon it and spirit to those who walk in it. I am the Lord, I've called you in righteousness. I have taken you by the hand and kept you. I've given you a covenant, you as my people, a light to the nations, to open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison, those who sit in darkness. I am the Lord, that is my name, my glory give to no other, nor praise the idols." Long before Jonah, and in the mandate, the Jews, of course, we know historically, the ancient world was a very angry, wrathful world. We go from one empire, we go from the Assyrians to the Babylonians, we go to the warfare and the utter destruction. One reign upon the other, one king, one kingdom, wanting to do in the other. And the Jews were taken captive, were brought to slavery, and of course the exile. That was their exile, and the story of the birth of the nation really begins, with that coming out of Egypt. And throughout their history, there were certainly other dark days. We know from the destruction from the Romans. The Jews were constantly in and out of bad places. But still, their mandate was to do and to be a light to the world. Now, there are a lot of things in life, I maintain, that can swallow us up, create dark places in our lives. Jonah is at the end, he's grumping about a little discomfort for what scholars now feel. There's a story of this plant that Jonah is so upset he goes and builds a little tent or something and sits around and waits to see what's going to happen to Nineveh. And the story tells of a plant, this miraculous plant that's seeded, grows up to maturity in one night, and it's giving Jonah some comfort from the oppressive sun, from the strong wind. But suddenly it says that a worm comes and bango, that's this he didn't have any whatever that awful herbicide is, but anyway, they think that what the Hebrew is kikion for this plant. They think it was a castor bean plant. That's their best summation from the Hebrew for the kikion. It was a castor bean plant. Now, what's interesting about this plant that allegedly gave Jonah a little comfort from the sun and from the wind was this castor bean plant is extremely toxic. Everything, the leaves, the seeds, and you might be interested to know that that dangerous neurological chemical ricin comes from this plant. Ricin comes from the castor bean plant. So I don't know if it's a little irony thrown in here that what temporarily gave Jonah a little comfort was had the potential to kill him. But he's not worried about anything but himself. We can see in the story, and I want to just bring this to our lives. We all know ways in which sometimes I've been swallowed up at times in my life. I've just been in a dark place, and I think that many of you can relate to that. And our only hope is that we get coughed up. Now, we get coughed up through the maybe sometimes it's through the right minister, or the right therapist, or the right friend, or the right teacher. Sometimes that getting coughed up comes from our devotional reading. Some of us, we have these little devotional things called the Daily Bread. And Ned and I get a daily inspirational piece in the mail, in our emails every day. and they come from a wide range of of the wisdom literature from all over the world, because there is wisdom literature that to be found in every world religion and literally from the four corners of the earth. We end with Jonah ends with God's explaining to him when he's complaining about that plant dying instead of God sending his gracious self to the people of Nineveh. He explains to Jonah in the end that the essence of love involves labor. It takes labor to make something grow. I have a garden, and I grew up working on a farm. I know it takes work to help something grow or to make it grow. The book of Jonah explains that the essence of love involves some labor. It takes labor to make something grow. Labor and love are inseparable. We love that for which we labor, and we labor for that which one loves. I am fond of talking about, as I mentioned earlier in the Fireside Chats, the only one organization in the world that brings no harm to anyone. It's the Mutual Admiration Society. The Mutual Admiration Society. And my hope and goal for the First Parish Church is that we call ourselves not only the First Parish Church of Somersworth, but the Mutual Admiration Society. Go in peace. I'm going to have Annette read one of the pieces that we found so inspirational this week, and it's a prayerful piece by Longfellow, and I'm going to ask her to read it, and I think that it's inspiration.
Hello, friends. Thomas and I receive a daily newsletter called The Daily Stoic. And it tells so many inspiring lessons that we can learn from the Greek philosophers, Roman philosophers like Marcus Aurelius. And yesterday's included this wonderful poem, or part of a fragment of a poem, by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Now, he wrote this, the larger version. This is just a part of the poem because it's sort of like a grand poem. So it's rather long. He wrote this about 196 years ago for the 50th anniversary of his class, his college class, the class of 1825 in Bowdoin College in Maine. And the title of it is Morituri Salutamus, which is Latin for what the gladiators, before they went into the arena, would face the emperor and say, "We who are about to die, salute you." So that's what Morituri Salutamus or Morituri Te Salutamus means. But the inspiration in it is, to me, look at this. He's there with his friends. They all graduated, so they should be in their 70s, perhaps. They all graduated from Bowdoin College, and this is their 50th anniversary, so a great part of their lives have passed. They're now grandparents and so on. And they have a shorter life going forward than what they've already lived. But this is the inspiration that I saw, that it's not too late for any of us. I thought that no matter what happened, no matter who we are, no matter our health, that there's still time to become a better person or to do our best work, which can be as simple as someone says, well, I'm at home alone during COVID and all I have is my telephone next to me. Well, you can call your friends and bring them a ray of sunlight. Just a little word, a little positive affection, and so on. And that, you never know when you're calling someone if they're facing a very dark moment, and you bring them that burst of joy like a ray of sunlight. So here is this part of the poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. It is too late. Ah, it's never too late. Nothing is too late till the tired heart shall cease to palpitate. Cato learned Greek at 80. Sophocles wrote his Grand Oedipus and Simonides bore off the prize of verse from his compeers when each had numbered more than 80 years. And Theophrastus at 80 had but begun his Characters of Men. Chaucer at Woodstock with the Nightingales at 60 wrote the Canterbury Tales. Goethe at Weimar, toiling to the last, completed Faust when 80 years were past. These are indeed exceptions, but they show how far the Gulf Stream of our youth may flow into the Arctic regions of our lives, where little less than life itself survives. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, it tells me that remain active, keep your minds sharp, no matter how old you are. This attitude will do you well, will serve you well. There is no time like the present. Keep your hearts open. You still have time. Bye.
Go in peace and be a light in the world.